So, impact driver at the ready. I'm keeping torsion on this with my thumb and finger, couple of quick taps. That's it, the screw's loose. Two more screws to do. They're in the end of the body here at this point and this point. Bit hard to see. I'll collapse the front down. See if we can get this in a more comfortable position. And these may or may not come loose. They are going to need hammer treatment. Back very shortly. A quick tap with the hammer and they are loose. Okay, let's have a look at these struts. They should lift out now. When we lift these struts out, note various things. Disconnect that. There's a spring here. The return spring for the shutter release mechanism. Don't lose that. Here is the shaft. This is the cocking shaft that runs from the back of the camera, takes the action of the cocking rack through the camera, through the pinion at the front, to the rack in the shutter casing. That cocking shaft is held in place with this little bracket. And this little bracket sits underneath the back here, underneath this set of struts, and the screw passes through it and holds it all in place. At the base of the camera there's this plain spacer washer which fills the equivalent space between the struts and the body at the bottom. And at this stage the camera body is as stripped down as we need to get it. There's not much left in there, to tell the truth. The leatherettes on the front, I'm going to have to lift this to get that green scunge out from under there, that Zeiss bump stuff. I may not have to lift the leather off completely. I'm certainly not disturbing the leather on the back, and the leather on the other side looks okay. So we'll put the body to one side. Let's have a look at our struts. What can we tell about these? Well, if I just pulled those out between my fingers, they latched into position without any problem. So perhaps the distortion in the action of opening the camera was mostly in the door, not the struts themselves. There's another return spring on here. All of this is working quite smoothly, so I'm not going to disturb that. Yeah, they sort of pop into position okay. I'm just going to check these struts. So, here, these inner struts here and here, they should be straight, they should be flat. You hold a straight up edge to them, they should be flat. The outer struts, they should not, they should be slightly dished so that the ends are higher than the middle. And that means that when this is held firmly in the camera body, under a little bit of tension, it has the effect of pushing these buttons up. It tensions those buttons so they want to pop up into position. So I'm looking at these two levers, these two arms, and seeing if they have a satisfying shape to me. I want them to be slightly dished. We know it was a bit reluctant to pop into position. I'm just checking that they look okay and that the inner struts are straight. That's pretty good. These will just bend in your fingers. You usually don't need to indulge in shoving them in the vise and doing wicked things to them. That one there looks a little bit suspect. Sometimes they are damaged, particularly at the ends here. When the camera's been dropped, the ends of the arm here may not be square. They may have an obvious bend in them. It's difficult for me to judge how square and straight things are because of my eyesight. This one here doesn't look right to me. I'm going to give that a little tweak just to square it up a bit. No, that's not quite right. That's certainly not. This piece here is not perpendicular to that arm. That's what I'm saying. There's not much in it, and it's made. No, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Alright, so these struts, all I need to do now is clean these, and I'll just use, I'm not going to put them through the ultrasonic cleaner. There's no advantage in me doing that in this case, I think. If you do put them in the ultrasonic, the buttons, top and bottom, they should have black paint in the middle of those little buttons. That's got half the paint, that's got virtually none. But any of them that have got paint, if you put them in the ultrasonic, the paint's now gone. Put that to one side, that looks okay. So, I'm just checking that everything I need to put through the ultrasonic cleaner is here, and stuff that I don't need is carefully put aside. These pieces, what I do is they go into a tin. It's came from baked beans or soup or something. They just go into a tin and they get covered in the tin in naphtha. No, not naphtha. What do I use? Paint and it's a product for painters to use. It's called wax and grease remover. It's used for preparing surfaces prior to painting so that there's no grease or oil left on the surface, so you get a good bond. It's very good at removing grease or softening grease, and I use that. So I put some of that in. So these go into a tin, they get covered in the solvent. I usually just put a lid on the tin. I use one of these as a lid just to stop solvent from going all over the place. The tin is then suspended in the ultrasonic cleaner. So you've got water in your ultrasonic cleaner and your tin suspended in it, and I just give it 10 minutes. 10 minutes in the ultrasonic cleaner is typically enough, and that removes all the old grease, even that thick hardened rubbish there. It tends to remove all of that, and if it hasn't, I can scrape that out later before I reassemble. And then the components, after they've been through the wax and grease remover, I put them into the ultrasonic cleaner in hot detergent water, and the detergent I use is an ammonia based household detergent, handy, nothing particularly flash, in hot water, and they get another 10 minutes like that, and after that they get a rinse under hot water and tipped into a big sieve and then dried carefully under a hairdryer until all the moisture is gone and they're nice and dry, and at that stage they'll be clean and sparkling. In fact, they'll look shinier than they ever did before in their life, and they'll be ready for the reassembly. And hopefully by that stage I'll be 25 minutes further down the track in hand cleaning the components that need to be cleaned by hand. I'm just looking around the bench here to see what terrible things I can see. I've got some film chips. Now film chips are the little bits of film that have been torn out between the sprocket holes, and typically you get those when people have been unduly rough rewinding film or something of that nature. Anyway, I'll clean these, we'll come back and do some hand cleaning on the other components. So here are all the parts that I need to clean manually, and I just use cotton buds, Q-tips, naphtha, cigarette lighter fluid, they're your friends, and I'll just clean these pieces one by one. And what we're looking to do here is just remove old grease, particularly dried grease, all the dust and grit that it may have accumulated over time, and while you're cleaning it gives you the opportunity to look fairly closely at the object you're cleaning. In fact, it forces you to do so, so that it gives you, makes sure that if there are any obvious faults, you'll become aware of them. And then if you become aware of them, you can decide how you're going to deal with them. So you can see there's a lot of dust and rubbish here. The process is very simple. Just soak some naphtha onto your cotton bud and run over all the surfaces and areas like that where the little pinion is. Get rid of all that dust and grit that's on there. Now with these cameras there is a spring, top and bottom here, which provides a little bit of impetus to pop the struts up. It doesn't pop them all the way, it's not intended to. It just starts the action, if you like. Takes the front of the camera, takes the struts up a little bit, where you can then pull it forward. And as I gather these filthy things up, I just toss them into a little container. They can go into the rubbish. This piece here is the catch that holds the front shut. Usually that's pretty non-controversial. You just need to make sure that it moves fairly freely. So I'll just continue cleaning all of these bits, making sure that I remove all the old dirt. That's pretty much it for in there. This is the track that the arm for the rangefinder follows. That picks up a bit of dirt. I'm cleaning that. Cleaning up all around the top plate. This is where the chrome top comes down to. So dust sort of settles in that edge, finds its way in. And with moisture and time, you know, you can often get corrosion along there. Often that doesn't amount to much more than staining, and there's not much you can do about it. But if there's lumps and bumps, you better get rid of them. Scrape that stuff off. In an ideal world, all this would look nice and shiny, just like a new one when we're finished, but aluminium stains. It's the oxidised aluminium that stains, really. You can't get that staining off short of removing metal, which is undesirable. The main thrust is to get rid of any dust or grit, contaminants. With this pinion here, you need to make sure that that's relatively clean otherwise it won't run smoothly. So running a toothpick between the teeth can be very useful, or splashing some naphtha on there and using a very stiff paintbrush to run across those teeth can also achieve the same thing. I don't think this ever runs through a full rotation in its normal use, so some part of this pinion probably has never been engaged, and it's probably got dried rubbish sitting in there as a result, because it's never been disturbed. And inevitably when you reassemble the camera, that part of the pinion will become engaged, and you don't want rubbish making the action lumpy and bumpy. That looks okay, and I'll just need to blow that out to make sure I've got rid of any extra dust. And at the base of the camera, let's lift that, where we have our rewind button moves in here, and the catch for the rewind button moves here, and our film advance shaft runs through here, and this is where the tripod socket fits, but there's not much else there to see. And in the back of the camera, often you'll find that there's a whole pile of film chips from where they've been torn out of the film. They accumulate here underneath the bottom of the spool. This isn't bad at all, but here I'm just making sure I get rid of that dust. There's not much grease in here to speak of. These are the film rails. The film runs along those rails. They need to be clean. They need to be free from any sharp edges in case they've been damaged. These ones are fine. And the pressure plate needs to be clean and smooth. Run your finger across it. Now, if there are any hollows in it, if there are pits in there, that's not going to cause a problem as long as they don't have a sharp edge. But any lumps, any bumps on there, you certainly need them removed. If the camera has sat decades with a film in it at any stage, often the film will stick. The gelatin will have, or the film will have softened, and often it'll stick, and you end up with tiny remnants of film stuck to the pressure plate. Now anything on that pressure plate will scratch the back of the film, and you'll end up with what they call tram lines on your negatives, which is undesirable. Well, that's all pretty good. Let me have a look at this Zeiss bump problem here. I'll peel that leather back a little bit and get this stuff out. See that green waxy rubbish? I want that out. I don't think I need to take that leather off completely, but I do want that rubbish out from underneath it. It's just a corrosion product. Almost certainly it's promoted by dissimilar metals, of course, and whatever's in the leather. It'll be something natural of the leather itself, the fats or whatever that are in the leather, or it'll be the tannins from the tanning process, but something there is promoting that electrolysis reaction, if you like, that's causing things to happen. Yeah, that's a bit lucky. I'm wondering whether I need to pull that leather off completely to get that clean. I don't like removing leather unless I have to, because sometimes it tears. Let's see if it'll lift off. Oh, I think it can be done. the adhesive is breaking away from the aluminium fairly well in some parts, and the rest of it, the leather is breaking away from the adhesive, and so that there are leather fibres being left behind on the body. The edges are often very well stuck. Anything where this leatherette or the leather is folded over an edge is often extremely well stuck, and if it's going to cause problems in getting it loose, it's usually around edges. Okay. The leather may be very thin in areas like this. It may have been skived down. Basically, they reduce the thickness of the leather at the edges so that it sits down nicely without catching on the door. I don't know I need to remove any further than that really. It seems to be very well stuck. Alright. So that's where that green rubbish was sitting on the leather. It's certainly a greasy looking stuff, and you can see it sort of stained the leather a bit there like it was oily. I'll just remove that with a bit of naphtha. Now our strap lugs here are chromed brass. They're held in place there with a nickel plated screw to the aluminium body. There's a screw here and there's a rivet through down below it, which is also probably nickel plated brass. So you've got a decent selection of dissimilar metals there. Just make sure any loose crumbs of this rubbish are off. The Leatherettes are not they're not doing a particularly hard job. The adhesive doesn't need to work very hard to keep something flat and flexible stuck to something else that's flat and inflexible. So you don't need to go crazy preparing the surface, just so long as loose stuff is removed. This is a bit lumpy and bumpy because the adhesive's quite thick, but the hollows here match the humps here, and the humps here match the hollows there, so it should glue back down nice and flat and smooth. And of course the rubbish is out from underneath there, so that should glue down well too. Alright, that'll do I think. That body's as clean as I think I need to get it. I'll put it to one side, I'll glue that thing back before it goes together. The door, front door, bit dusty and dirty. I've already pushed these tabs in slightly. May or may not have overdone that, but we can overcome that if that's a problem. It's much easier to stretch them back out than it is to push them back in once they're on the camera. So I'm just cleaning this, making sure that dust and dirt and rubbish is off it. If it wasn't for grease that's on these, you would just clean them with a dry paintbrush, but the grease will, if present along those pins, will just make a mess of that. That looks okay. That looks okay. We'll put that to one side, that was easy. Our focus scale ring, bit of dried grease on the back of there. And probably on the inside, yes. Now, positioning this on the focus on the outer helical, you can often see where you've been because the screw heads have typically bitten into this ring, and I can see a mark here, here, here. I can sort of make out a faint one there. Now they're also great guides to putting the focus scale ring back in the right position. Sometimes they're the only guides you've got if you've been silly enough to disassemble things without marking them first, or if the camera came to you in pieces. Something stuck on the bottom of this. I don't know what it is. It's not really removing well with solvent, so it may be some food-based substance, something sugary. The remains of a donut or an ice cream, who would know? That'll do nicely, that looks very good. The struts, well, I think I've squared those struts up enough. I don't think they need any extra. They are not ugly, damaged looking struts by any means. I think the camera has suffered at some stage. Either someone's tried to close the camera up without pushing in the buttons top and bottom first, or the camera has been dropped. Of course, the camera has to be dropped in the open position for that to cause a problem, but that's not at all hard to achieve. In here, the cleaning is mostly concerned with removing any grit that's present. An old grease tends to hold grit in position. In fact, it's a magnet for grit. Dust, which is very frequently just very small particles of grit, is a wonderful grinding paste, and if you don't remove the old grease, it's just a grinding paste, and every time something moves, it's just grinding away the metal, and the old grease then is acting as an abrasive instead of as a lubricant. So it's not the old grease itself that's the problem, it's what the grease contains. It's the dust that it's picked up over the ages. Just cleaning all of this, making sure everything's looking good. Everything appears to be pretty good to me, and then I'll collapse the struts slightly so that I can get to the pieces that the struts were covering. Alright, they look fine to me. I think they'll be good. So put them to one side. We're running out of easy stuff here. It's their take-up spool. Now I know I mentioned damage to their take-up spool from solvent. It's cracked. This one's cracked. I can see a crack running across it there, and if I look on the inside, the crack extends through to the inside, and if I just twist it a bit, I can actually see light through it. So this sprocket, this take-up spool is damaged. It certainly looks like solvent damage there. It probably wasn't naphtha, it was probably something more enthusiastic than that. Naphtha is usually pretty safe with these. So this take-up spool, I'm going to find a replacement for that, because that crack is not good. I don't know how I'd go about achieving, if I wanted to break something like this, I'm not sure how I could do that. But that is certainly cracked right through. Very interesting. Well, how you do that. We know it's been abused with solvent. At least that's how it appears to me. I wonder whether someone had actually put something under it and leave it up, thinking that it was stuck down. You don't know what goes through people's heads with things like this. You don't know what crazy stuff other people have done. But that would do it. Alright, find a new one of those. This thing is our focus mount. Now, the focus mount, this needs to be cleaned, and this stuff is really hard. It's like a wax. We want rid of all of that. This stuff will set like concrete, and we need it all out. So I'm getting out the bulk of it here using a toothpick, and this is pretty thick. Very unpleasant. So the camera equivalent of earwax. This stuff, being as thick and heavy as it is, would actually stop things from moving. Because it's like a wax, and because it probably is well spread and stuck to both surfaces, and because it's so heavy, what would tend to happen is that in hot weather it would all melt, and it would just form one continuous solid mass between the outside and the component on the inside. And in cold weather, that continuous mass would be very stiff, hard wax, and it just wouldn't shear. When you went to turn the knob, nothing would want to move. These two things sticking up there, those two flat bars sticking up, they control the action of the focus. They control the position of the inner helical, so that the inner helical can only move up or down. It can't rotate. The outer helical is coupled to the inner helical, and as the outer helical is turned, it moves the inner helical inwards or outwards. That's looking pretty good. Well, hopefully my video camera reached a file size limit and shut off without telling me, so you didn't see all the process of scraping the grease out of this, but that doesn't matter. The job's done now. Just cleaning it up now with a bit of solvent, some naphtha, on a cotton bud to remove the last of that grease. These pieces are all pretty clean and require very little work. Yeah, look at all those brass shavings that fell out of there. What was that about? It's a brass bush top and bottom in the sprocket here, of course. They look to me like remnants from the manufacturing process. Weird. Yeah, a few of them about. It's unusual and it's very strange. That looks more like machining swarf than it looks like anything else. Get these other bits cleaned. Nothing here is bad, as I said, it's just been cleaned by hand because they're painted parts or have some painted component to them. And this, of course, I've got to find a star washer to go on the top of that when we put that back together in the film advance. Frame counter's dial is looking good, all the numbers are present, bit of dried grease on the back there, see the back of that. Just the centre of our rewind there, bit of trapped grit in there I think, bit of dust. Interestingly, that's a bit brassed at the top, a bit brassy. I don't know why that should be. Perhaps it's been rubbing on the case. Even that doesn't make sense. It only rubs on the case when the case is closed. Just clean this shroud from the front. And that brings me down to the film advance lever, which is reasonably clean as these things go. The rubber here is perished and I'll have to replace that. Not sure what the adhesive was that was used here. Mostly I just want that cleaned out so that it's not creating lumps and bumps. Yeah, it's quite brittle. Might even be shellac, this stuff. I should get some isopropyl and we'll find out. Let's try a bit of this. Yeah, well, it's cleaned away. I'm not entirely sure that there was shellac, but it's gone. That's the main thing. Just dirt and finger grease on the knob here. In an ideal world, you might want to ultrasonic clean that. Don't use an ammonia-based cleaner in an ultrasonic cleaner. If you're doing aluminium, it reacts with the aluminium, everything goes very dull looking. Just always watch aluminium parts in a cleaner. Okay, that'll do. That part's all sorted out. I need to go and find my cleaned parts from the ultrasonic, which have all been done with solvent, the grease and wax remover, and cleaned with ammonia based household detergent and very hot water.